Thank you, Pyra, and welcome everyone to the post-game lobby where we're with Vedius, the Fish Show, and Origen. Amazing still to wrap up the entire week. We're going to start by talking about that match. Obviously, Giants, not only 2-0 Fnatic, but 4-0 on the week, and that was the first time since week 3 of the summer split, 2015, that they managed to get a 4-0 week.
Was that back when they played Jax every game? I believe it was with the old lineup. Times change.
Times do change. Yeah. So it's Maxlor's birthday, but it's also Spirit's birthday, I think. So it was kind of a birthday boy jungle matchup. And I don't know if that was what was going on early in this game.
I think that's our analysis.
Like
that's our analysis.
Gift Maxlor the gift of first blood, because that was...
You must have the worst birthdays if you have to gift other people.
Yeah, I know, right?
That kind of sucks.
I'm not entirely sure what Spirit was trying to do. His whole execution, not only did he tank the entire red buff, he allowed Maxlor to get the smite. I mean, amazing. With the insight of a jungler, why would you be going for such an aggressive jungler?
Level 2, no ghost, 50% HP.
I think maybe he just felt the heat from game 1, to be fair. Felt like that he needed to make a play that could get his team an advantage, but I don't think it was necessary. He just went for it, and I don't know, I guess he was trolling a bit at that point. Went for the red buff, allowed Maxlor to smite it and just tried to do too much. I don't know.
Yeah, we're going to take a look at this in a second, as well as the other things that Maxlor was doing. Okay, there we are. So first up this moment.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. The thing is that if he didn't tank the red buff and actually thought about the smite interaction with the red buff, he would have probably been able to fight Maxlor off the red buff. But it just doesn't make sense, and Maxlor basically abused the fact that Olaf is not on the map anymore, sees Faven overextended in the mid lane, and it's a free kill with the exhaust coming in, and...
free kill top?
Yeah, the free kill top. It's basically like solo queue at this point. I think Fnatic were completely tilted to a certain extent, and just didn't respect Maxlor at all. Which again may speak to what I said earlier when they said that I do think that they're a bit cocky in the way that they approach the game. Maybe it came through this game, or they were just really desperate to do something and being aggressive. Didn't feel like that they could play the game at an even level and still win the game. Yeah,
and it seemed like it was something they really practiced like this early invade in, because what they did in the early game, like level 2, they were just hard pushing top lane. They had the 2v2 Australia lanes up there, so they were hard pushing that into tower. You invade into the enemy red buff, because then your support can roam first and then back up your jungler in case there is any sort of skirmish happening. But again, when Spirit then completely messes up and tanks the red buff and has no ghosts or anything, and he dies, well then you kind of need to change your game plan, because they just kept playing aggressive on top side. Even had a ward ready. The trinket ward was available for Yellow Star. Didn't place it. All right, keep pushing. You could even ran to the wall, magical journey over the wall. No, not happening either. And then he just dies, and that's 3 early kills now for Maxlor and Giants, and then the game is just done.
Started Snowballing, player of the game, Sonstar for us. He already had that pentakill, but then we actually didn't rate him as high, but his Jhin is really, really good.
It certainly is. I just think it fits his playstyle, to be honest. The fact that he can just sit on the backline and he's not forced to be in this carry position because of how strong Jhin is considered right now in Europe. Amazing mentioned earlier that a lot of teams just don't seem to properly know how to deal with the Jhin, and even though they drafted the Olaf, which is actually really good at diving onto the backline and killing the Jhin, after the Olaf, it does seem that the draft went in a bit of an obscure route that didn't really enable them to properly capitalize and take advantage of that Jhin pick.
Yeah, the thing is that given that they first picked Olaf and basically showed like kind of what they want to go with, because Olaf kind of sets you up for only one thing, and that's hard engage. They see the Nami Jhin coming in on the other side then, and then decide to pick the Gnar, which sets you up for losing lane again, and you're basically slowing the pace just by that, because you give the enemies too many options already, and if the early game then goes so bad, I just don't see any options for Fnatic to actually win this game.
Not only do you give them, you know, the one counter pick, because Giants are on red side, so they always have at least one counter option unless you have multiple flex. You even give them 2 counter picks, so both solo laners actually able to be counter picked in this game. Their last pick Victor as well is just a super safe option against Ryze, so it made a ton of sense for Giants, and they just felt like in control. I think Maxlor talked about it, how the draft is much better for them now. They don't make the same mistakes that we see Fnatic make. You know, honestly, all the games Fnatic played this week, we have been questioning the draft. In the past, we've done the same. So clearly something needs to change for them in how they approach the game.
Yeah, on top of that, we also asked the people at home to send us in who was their MVP of the split so far. And that Chrysalis has weighed in on the discussion, saying, Spirit has been the base of Fnatic. When he does well, he goes off. He's the biggest reason they're second. Now, you could interpret that both ways, obviously, because in this game, if he then doesn't go off, it seems that they don't have any way to deal with the fallout.
I think if you just watch Fnatic's games, they usually try to play with lane swaps and basically have like a standard game coming in from there on, where they have the same setups every time and basically just try to get Spirit ahead like in farm-wise. And once people caught up to that, to how he plays lane swaps, I think that people will be able to equalize whatever he does and maybe exceed him, because it seems to be a way where we've seen that in the spring split, to be fair, where we basically had the memes of Spirit out like trying to outfarm the enemy jungle and sort of outplaying him, and that's something that has come in again, where like he's obviously a great player and I really respect him, which is something I said on the show beforehand too a couple of times. But I do think that the game approach per se for him, if Fnatic is not able to play a game throughout their practice and basically like go by a standard game that they have practiced 24/7, he seems kind of lost, to be fair, and he tries to go for too much and tries to reach for too much. But I do think that given that they're second place and that's something that is still respectable, he's definitely been where he should be in most of the case if Fnatic is able to pull off their game.
How do you compare him to someone like Trick? Because a lot of people actually like to say they have the same jungle style. Do you agree on that? Like Trick and Spirit are kind of playing the same way?
I think Spirit sees the game more on an individual level. I think he definitely thinks about his matchup way more. He definitely wants to have a good matchup in most cases, which was why he opts for the red smite a lot of the times for the Elise, and definitely doesn't see the game as global as Trick. I think Trick is more like he sees that he needs to have a bit of farm, he needs to outfarm the enemy or like get ahead, but he knows his power spikes pretty well, and he's not reliant on any kind of snowballing mechanic. He's just able to read the map on a really high level, which is something that I can't say about Spirit, whereas Spirit is way better, or like at least better, at reading the individual matchup.
Yeah, we'll take a look at the player of the game leaderboard later on. We'll see that Trick is still reigning supreme there. I do want to talk about some other matches today, starting with Roccat versus H2K, 1-1, and it looked like it might be another 0-2 for H2K, but they did find their form later. We had Airwax on the desk with Steelback in an interview, and I asked him about the top 3, and he said he found that Schalke is more deserving of the third spot in the league than H2K. What do you think, Amazing?
I think so too. I think Schalke is a team that has definitely a lot of aggression. They're able to win their games from the enemies, and they don't rely on any throw whatsoever. So I do think that Schalke right now is better, if not way better than HK, because HK, the only way they win is basically if they read enemies' mistake and try to punish them, whereas they cannot win a game on their own.
Do you feel like there's a change in Jankos from last split?
I don't think that Jankos changed. I think the Jankos Thunder connection changed. That I don't feel like they're as threatening anymore. They operate pretty individual from one another, similar to what we've seen like maybe from me and Mithy last split when we played with one another. In the beginning of the split, we felt disconnected with different ideas of how to play the game, but at some point came together, whereas Fana and Jankos definitely seem disconnected and don't know how to properly approach the game, because there's always the option, for example, in lane swaps, if we think about it, that the jungler can farm the offside in order to basically just to get a farm like ahead and farm, but the dual lane still has to push out, and in those kind of scenarios is where HK seems to be lost in what they have to do and don't seem to be as punishing as they used to be, especially come last split.
I think there's also a big problem when we look at the two carries on H2K, Rio and Freeze. At the moment, while the game is not about individual abilities right now, it's a lot about teamwork, obviously. You still need these carries to be able to step up, especially if we look at some of the games today where they play like Draven Zillion. Like, obviously, that's on Freeze to be the hard carry, and Ryu to always have ulti ready for him and protect him.
Too.
Had a Shen too as well to even protect him, and then Ryu messes up like almost every single ulti. I think Ryu yesterday also looked very shaky. So you have basically two weak carries at the moment, and then you have your support jungle being a bit disconnected as well. And then they talk a lot about having issues with communication on stage. So we got like 3 big issues right there for H2K as a team. And because the LCS is so close right now, that's why they end up losing a lot of these games and also get beaten by Roccat, get beaten by Unicorns, a lot of teams where you normally would say H2K should win every single time.
Perk said they'll fix their problems in time. Do you agree, Vedius?
I mean,
For
the
playoffs?
thing is, we're halfway through the split now, and Rockat's still showing the same problems that they had before. So whatever training regime they've put into themselves, it's clearly not working, because if you're now 4.5 weeks in or 5 weeks in and you're still demonstrating the same problems, there's clearly an underlying issue that they need to solve.
Yeah, I meant H2K, but it also goes for Roccat, obviously.
Goes for Origen, Fnatic, Roccat, all these teams. I can just keep going. I'll take every single team here.
I agree for HK. I think that they No, actually, I disagree. I'd say that HK is a team that has in the past been good, and their players have basically been good, and they have been reaching high regular season ceilings. But I do think that right now, since they're already like kind of downish, and they're basically like not playing as well as they did, for example, last split, I don't think that they can reach a similar height that they did last split, and I don't think that they have the players to do that, because you can talk about championship players or basically players that are able to compete for a championship every single season, and I don't see that in HK besides maybe Rio, because he has been on the biggest stage, but none of the other players definitely basically has. Although I'm not to a certain extent, but even he didn't make it to the finals per se. So none of their players really has the deep championship experience that we can see, for example, in Origin, which is why I'm still hopeful that we're gonna make it out of there. And it's same for Fnatic, that there are certain players you can trust to turn it around, but there are other players that you should be just scared that they can't. And we've seen it time and time again. And we can make excuses and say that they may have just problems with their communication on stage and all. But I do think that it's just the general play of the USCS going up, and they can't compensate.
Oh, that's quite interesting, because one of the first things we asked Prolly when the lineup changed, I think it was last split around, we asked him, hey, you always have these tactical plans, but you always end up in third. How are you going to do better? It might have even been last year. And he said, well, we can because the individual level of our players, so we can just move up like this. But you say it's not there and it's never going to be there?
So that was the Forgiven lineup, obviously last split, and also where Rio had a very good summer split, if we go back to it, and also had a good start to last split at least. And again, that's two of the carries we're looking at right now. It's obviously Freeze instead of Forgiven, and while Freeze might be a better team player in terms of individual level, Forgiven is above him. And obviously, again, Rio also underperforming right now, and then you have these issues you talk about, because if there's one thing EULCS have gotten during the off-season, I feel like there are some better individual players, while our macro level might have gone down a little bit, and we have some very, very messy games from time to time. At least we have gotten rid of a lot of the old players who no longer were good enough. Like, if we consider the fact that 12 players got replaced, in the off-season, and most of them didn't even return to the LCS. They're just straight out.
Yeah, indeed. A team that did make a statement, and it also has a lot of new players from last split that in them is Splice. They 2-0'd Vitality today, if I recall correctly, because I don't think I saw the tail end of that other game, but they did. So, big statement for Splice. Trashy was player of the game again once today, and he's been impressing us a lot.
I feel like junglers are having a pretty significant impact in Europe right now, because Trashy has been a big determining factor in Splice's wins and losses. And while we have highlighted Mickey and his Bard plays in particular, the person that's constantly standing out is actually Trashy in his performance. We have to give an honorable mention to Senkirks on his Azir though, because he was making some pretty impressive plays. And while the team as a whole seems to be coming together, I'd be actually quite interested to hear what Amazing thinks of Trashy as well, because do you think that he is the large reason why Splice is doing so well right now?
I think they're playing with a practice advantage. I think they started practicing way earlier than any other team. I think they started out a month earlier. So I think their system just works really well. I think Yamato-kun is a good coach, and I do think that he puts the players in the right position to basically fulfill whatever they can do. And I think Trashy is someone that I wouldn't think of as a great individual player. I think he's mechanically sound, and I do think that he's able to pull his weight. But the system that they established basically makes him be able to be the player that he wants to be. Just execute and basically just follow a game plan. And as soon as he has that established in his mind, he doesn't have to think about that part anymore. He can actually let his individual play come in, which is something that obviously through solo queue you can kind of make happen. And it's basically like this: you build a base for yourself in terms of like game knowledge and everything like that, and then you can make individual play come in. And I do think that his base has been like there right now, and individual play basically on top. And but I would put it back on Yamato-kun, to be fair.
Oh, wow. Yeah, because in the first split when we saw Splice, of course, Yamato-kun came out and said that, hey, this is a project, we need to get the basics down. And then you always go, we'll see later. But it is actually, he is reaping the rewards. Is that how you say that? And the lineup is performing. You say consistency, having practiced long, playing long together. Vitality obviously brought Shook in. What do you think of that whole thing?
I think Shook has an interesting approach to the game. I think he has a carry approach, but he's also really good at actually reading the map, surprisingly. I think that he's someone that is not scared to just pull the trigger once in a while, and even if he goes 0-20 in a game, he will still make an impact because of the experience coming in. If they really had communication issues in general, where were unable to have Mighty Bear on the same page as the rest of the team, I do think it's a great change. Because I do have a lot of respect for Shook for the way he approaches the game and is able to basically come in after not doing anything more or less for 3 months and just plays on a decent level again, or maybe in a good level. And I do think that he's actually going to be a good change for them.
One of the big things Vitality highlight about Shook is that he's a jungler who plays for the team. He's very vision focused. He listens to the game plan, where Mighty Bear is kind of the opposite. Mighty Bear is that I'm going to carry alone. I'm going to hard farm 24/7. If you get ganked by the enemy jungler and fall behind, I don't care. I need to farm. And if it works for him and the gank doesn't work for the other jungler, yes, he gets ahead and he becomes stronger in fights. But before that, he sets the lanes behind, where Shook is the opposite. Like, Shook will listen to what the team needs for him. He sets down a lot of vision, has probably a better overview of how to actually play professionally than Mighty Bear. So I feel like that is a good change. Now I just want to see more players than CapoShot actually step up and use that, because Nuke Dog has not been performing that well.
I think Mighty Bear suffer from the same issues that HGK is sometimes suffering from, if we draw a parallel, because Mighty Bear is someone that's able to punish mistakes really well. He's mechanically sound. He may have actually been one of the top 2 or top 3 best mechanical junglers in Europe, but the thing is that he doesn't have a proper game plan in his mind, and he doesn't plan 2 to 3 minutes ahead. He plans in the moment, sees a camp, it's up, I have to take it, I have to get farmed, I have to get myself ahead, which is what you talked about. So it's down to basic experience and basically have him maybe grab it by just listening to Shook and the communication when that comes in, and maybe pick up on that. But yeah, that's basically Shook being there is definitely good for them, I think.
Do you think we're going to see Mighty Bear to split?
I mean, it all depends on how quickly he learns, because he's still in the house as a sub. He's going to watch them practice. He's going to watch replays with Sean's, obviously. So I think it all comes down to how fast he actually learns to play, with his team. If he doesn't adapt, if he doesn't change, then I don't think we will see him this split. I think Shook will just keep playing then.
All right, we'll see what happens. One other series I want to take a look at, G2 versus OG. We heard the G2 side of things earlier, so now we have Amazing here. 1-1 in the end. Soaz was the player of the game for Game 1. We're going to see that here. Impressive play by him. And Trick then in Game 2. Amazing. Tell us your general thoughts about these 2 games.
Game 1 was actually really well played by us. I think we did a good job at executing. We just had a bit of a trouble finishing the game, where it took a bit too long and basically reminded me in the game of the Fnatic game that we had.
We also got reminded.
Yeah,
so I was concerned that would actually go the 80-minute, but it didn't. So I was glad.
Why is it so hard to finish? Tell me, in your mind, why is it so difficult for you guys to finish when you have 3 inhibs down? Is it because you're afraid of overcommitting for something?
Yeah, if we do have a game where we actually feel like we have the control and all, we don't want to lose it. I think every team that we have played against and have actually had those long games are just teams that are able to stall it out, and we also have to look at the comps that they played.
Yes.
Zillion, Sivir starts out the game if they want to. There's no way we can approach them without basically being caught out. The only thing we can do is circumvent the whole thing and maybe put a couple of zero portals up, maybe put a couple of banners up, or maybe just TP bots in their base. But we didn't think of that much, I think. So that may have happened, but it comes down to us not really thinking about any other plans besides the 5v5 straight up, and us also just respecting the enemy maybe a bit too much.
There was something interesting that I noticed, because when you got to the really, really late game, you had to make a decision between whether prioritizing the Elder Drake or the Baron, and there was one instance where you actually took the Elder and you gave them the Baron. And I was wondering as to whether or not that was a decision where you felt, we feel we can just use the extra damage and close out the game, or, I mean, how do you decide between which objective to take that late into the game?
Yeah, you don't decide. It's already decided for you. You take the Nash and you don't take the Dragon. I don't know why we did that. Good question, but the thing is, we're probably baited by the stats that it will give us, but honestly, if you think about it, I think we had a couple of clown dranks coming in, so we didn't really get the stats that we wanted to have, and the true damage is nice and all, and basically gives you a nice boost of maybe confidence even, because you see
you look fancy, right?
You're on fire, right?
Maybe that is what we're going for, but Nash at that point, especially have 2 to 3 nips down, is just too important, and as our macro mistake coming in, which we'll hopefully fix for next week.
We'll see. We'll take a look at the standings and see where you guys ended up at the end of week 5, as well as the other teams. I'm just going to cheat over here. So G2 back in first place on Fnatic, H2K, Schalke, Splice, Giants, Unicorns of Love, Team Vitality, Origen. Yeah, I found you. All the way down Stradley. Giants, by the way, with their other 2-0, that's 4 2-0s, and that's better than everyone besides Fnatic and G2.
It's just crazy. Giants have lost 5 games. Like, they have 5 0-2s. But they've also 4 2-0s.
Yeah.
So that's why they are now number 6 in the standings.
Fantastic strategy. Amazing. During midweek, we asked a couple of players, or maybe the week before, what they thought of the standings and if they were looking at it a lot. You just said we are starting to look at it because it's starting to get tight with the playoffs in the back of your head. So tell us what you think.
I do think a lot of things. I don't want to speak out on all of them, but I do think that right now it's basically for us where we do think of the playoff picture, and we do have a couple of games coming in with teams in our like bracket of the standings, more or less, where we play against Unicorns, I think, next week, and we play against Vitality next week.
Yep.
And these are the teams we gotta beat because they're definitely just next to us. So it crawls into the back of your mind to a certain extent, and you definitely do start to think about it, especially if you're a team with aspirations that we have, where we do want to go to Worlds. I don't want to have a long off-season, that'd be boring. I want to go to Worlds and be able to compete against the best players, and I do think that's the same for all of our players. So if we have those aspirations coming in and those ambitions coming in, you definitely have the thought process that, man, we got to start winning some games.
Yeah, and I think you should aspire not only to win them, but to win them in less than 35 minutes. No? Longest average game time in the LCS, so.
Yeah, I wonder why. 80 minutes?
I don't know.
67 minutes?
A win is still a win, and that's what's important at the end of the day.
Exactly.
Unless you lose after and
exactly, then it's the tie.
At that point, it's the tie.
Just 2-0 them. Let's take a look at the player of the game leaderboard. No surprises, I think, at the top. I don't think anything has changed there, seeing how Trick got another one today. So 6th, then Spirit, Cabochard. Jankos is in there. Amazing's also in the top 10. A lot of jump.
Yeah, but I think I'm only there because my name starts with an A.
Right, because the alphabet goes
That's a lot of threes.
Yeah. Who's your biggest surprise in there?
Actually, there's no surprise. Maybe Knight, because I didn't think he would be that strong coming in. But he's definitely shown that he's a player capable of carrying the team. But maybe also Gilius, because
Yes, I agree.
Gilius is someone that maybe for the split he thought was maybe even dumb coming into the game, that he doesn't understand the game on the highest level, and he's definitely shown it on a like completely different, that he's able to understand the game on the highest level while even transcending, which basically makes you a player of the game, because at that point you're equalizing whatever the enemy is doing, and you're basically putting something on top, and you're basically carrying your team to things that they couldn't normally do. And I think Gilius is someone that mechanically sound, understands the game. There's nothing bad about him. Good champion pool, and he's definitely capable of carrying games.
I think the big thing for Gilius, and the funny thing is that he got a lot of these play of the game very early on in the split, where he actually would like just hard carry games. He would just go like 10-0 on an Italy and just win the game for his team. Now, the last 2 weeks, I feel like he's trying to slot more into just being the team player. Right here, I know for a fact that they're trying to practice a lot with shot calling. He said in an interview himself how when they are inconsistent, it's because of him. He feels like because he's calling wrong, or his early game is not strong enough, he makes some mistakes. So he puts a lot of pressure on himself, which is very good if you can then obviously improve from there on, and you can then become a much better player. But I think Schalke wins as a team, honestly. And I especially like the fact that Schalke, very often when they do win, it's because they play well and not because the other team plays really poorly. So I think they actually have some really cool components, and I think also the mid laner is doing extremely well, which is another bonus for them.
Yeah, definitely.
think-
Fox crushing it.
I think Fox is incredibly good. I don't think that I expected him to do even close to as good as he does, but I do think that he's competing for being the top mid laner in the US, yes.
Yeah.
Which is something that most players maybe thought could happen, because he had a pretty good spring split, I think in 2015 when he played with Forgiven on the team in SK. He played extremely well, and he was able to basically use Svenskern's aggression, so Forgiven's aggression, to basically make a mark for himself. But now he's playing on a different team, and I do think that he's bringing the aggression at this point, because whenever I do see him playing lane swaps, I'd be surprised if I don't find him under my turret in minute 3. So
You don't have a turret. You're
It's
drunk.
mid lane.
Oh, yeah,
Sure.
I'm kidding. Just kidding.
Sure.
Sorry,
Okay.
comical interjection.
Okay, whatever.
Oh,
Now I'm completely tilted, but
no, I
it's
forgot.
fine. No, he's really aggressive. I do think that he's a great player, actually.
Yeah, definitely. The stats show it as well, even though a lot of players don't like to hear about the stats. But the player of the game leaderboard also has an influence of the on the summer MVP. For a full breakdown of how this ranking influences how the summer MVPs are chosen across the LCS, check out lolesports.com. And now for next week, the EU LCS will be back on Friday, so that's different, at 5 p.m. Central European Summertime, 8 a.m. Pacific, with Fnatic taking on Vitality and Origen facing the Unicorns of Love, as we see there. So Origen up versus UOL, that can always be a crazy game, amazing.
Yeah, I think last time was pretty crazy when we lost 0-2. I hope we don't repeat that, but I do think it's going to be a fun game to play.
I think Giants versus G2 could be a really good game. I think it's going to be pretty exciting. Giants have been improving a lot. We have seen Knight versus Perks. He brought out the LeBlanc today. I think LeBlanc versus whatever Knight has to pull out could be an interesting one.
Oh, your smile, Betty.
You love it.
You talk
I
about
love it.
Giants, and
I love
it's
it.
great. And to close out the day, then it's going to be our match of the week between Schalke and H2K. And very important, Week 6 begins on Friday and continues through Saturday. Our coverage will begin on Saturday at noon Central European Summertime. That is 3 a.m. Pacific for all of you night owls over in America. Just party and then watch the LCS or stay up late. Go rogue. I didn't tell you to do that, but yeah. Schalke, H2K?
I'm really excited for that one. We just talked about Schalke right now. We actually praised the team, we praised the players. So I think them trying to overtake H2K as the number 3 team in the region is actually super exciting. And I think right now, judging from how the teams have been playing, Schalke will get like a 60-40 from me. I actually think they will be the favorites to win, but in Europe it doesn't mean a whole lot. There's probably a high chance we get a 1-1, but I think Schalke has actually been looking extremely solid.
All right, we'll see what happens. If you still need more League after our broadcast, that's not me, after our broadcast tonight, grab your caffeine delivery system of choice and check out the NALCS, which will be going on later with Cloud9 facing Team Liquid, first up in the NALCS, and then Echo Fox facing Team Envy. It all begins at 2 a.m. Central European Summertime, 5 p.m. Pacific. We're actually quite early today. That's 3 hours away, so people are going to have to do something else.
So let's do an hour more of post-game lobby.
Yeah.
Amazing. Tell me about your life.
I actually really had to go to the bathroom before this, but I didn't. So if you keep talking for an hour, that might be problematic.
Blame him.
No, I'm just kidding. Next week, also, Friday Night's League will come your way 2 hours earlier. So mark your calendars. Is there anything else you want to say to Fish Show?
No, I am done for today.
All right, cool. Thaddeus?
European League of Legends is awesome.
Definitely and amazing.
No, nothing to say.
All right, well, thank you very much for joining us. Always fantastic insight for us here at the European LCS.